Hello, hello. How's it
Good
going?
morning.
Good
Or
morning.
good afternoon.
Good morning.
Going well. Going well.
Okay, we're here with WTAF.
We
which
talk
is-
about film.
Yeah! I'm Justine
Yeah.
McCloskey.
I'm Sarah Baudin.
And
today we've got Sergio Navarretta.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Set us up with the
Justine, you want
bio.
to take this? Yeah.
Go for it.
So Sergio Navarretta. I just decided to condense your name into one
That's cool.
name.
That's cool.
Sergio Navarretta is an internationally award-winning director who is fiercely passionate about bringing meaningful content to the screen. He draws inspiration from Italian neorealism and is fascinated by the human condition. He is the co-founder of Snap Films Inc. and hosts a podcast entitled Creatively Unleashed, available on all platforms. Most recently, Navarretta directed the dark comedy Yuppie, starring Lauren Holly and Brennan Close from Tiny Pretty Things, currently in post-production. He's attached to direct the epic TV series La America and the groundbreaking feature documentary on AI, The Humanity Project. He will also be helming Snap's latest feature film, What We Have Left, scheduled to shoot in the fall of 2024. Welcome, Sergio!
Ooh, hello. What a bio.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, yeah, and we shortened it.
I know. It's like you missed a whole bunch of stuff. No, I'm kidding.
I know.
Whenever people ask me, like, how did you start? It's like, well, when I was 5, my parents made me play the accordion. It's like, yeah, I don't know how far back you want to go.
Oh my goodness.
How
I've
very
heard
Italian.
This story. I know, I've heard this story before. A friend of mine, I think a friend of mine's father was forced to play the accordion, and eventually when he was a teenager, he was like, please let me play the guitar, and they're like, classical only.
Yeah.
But that's, so you started with the accordion.
It's interesting. Like when I studied at the Royal Conservatory, it's kind of like I'll just say it. It's boring. You're going to spend like 8 years learning theory and doing recitals, but you're not really like doing what you want to do. And I think the world has changed. Now artists are more up on just like creating and performing the kind of stuff they want to perform and not getting so hung up on the theory. I think that's healthy. It's going to get a lot more people hooked on art and hooked on music. So
yeah, like theory is a nice thing to have in your back pocket, but like feeling that intuitive vibe, going with the flow and like being creative and exploring and not having those walls kind of automatically stop you from taking that next step. I think that's, definitely making art more accessible is a good thing for sure. Well, so plugs, you have your film coming out in the fall that you're shooting, What We Have Left. Sergio's socials include, you can check him out at Snap Films Inc. on Twitter and Instagram for his film company. You also have at Sergio Director on Twitter, and Sergio Navarretta at Sergio Navarretta on Instagram. And yeah, oh my goodness, we're so happy to have you today. Pardon me?
He's everywhere.
When I was growing up, I just wanted to be John Smith. I wanted to abbreviate, have a simple, I used to dread it, sitting in classes like Sergio. It's like, can I just be like John Jones? I just wanted to simplify, and it wasn't so fun being the other in those days.
But now you have a memorable name, so.
Oh yeah. Sticks with you.
Yeah.
Sticks with
Being
you.
Italian became cool at some point.
And okay, so you were a very famous 5-year-old accordion player. Playing for, I'm assuming, I'm just going to picture you playing with like for your entire family. That's my image I have right now. It's 5-year-old Sergio doing performances for everybody in the family. But what pulled you?
It's an amazing instrument. Like if I tried to play it now, I couldn't because I got too much going on cognitively. That it's like, but when you're 5, you can totally do that simultaneously and playing the lead and the rhythm and the bass and all of the things all at once. It's amazing that a kid can do that. But yeah. Anyway.
That is
Yeah.
actually, now that I think about it, I wasn't even I was just thinking about my own trauma with accordions, and I wasn't even thinking about the fact that
Oh,
a 5-year-old's
no.
playing it. That's actually very true. That's pretty cool. And so so music was your main thing kind of growing up?
Yeah. Yeah, I always say music was my first love. Um, and then somewhere around my teen years into my 20s, we had a band. It was all great. It was very cool, living the dream. And then when we started dealing with record companies, I'm like, man, this is a seedy industry. And it's just, I was like a purist and I thought I'm going to sell my soul and I don't want to do that. And so I got into the, like an even more seedy industry, the film industry. So
I know.
at
I
some
was
point,
thinking that.
I transitioned, but from music into film. And then the truth be told, I spent a lot of time thinking about music, but also working with composers, and I love that part of it. It's just like,
Yeah.
the merging of the soundscape and the music with the visuals is really part of the magic trick that happens.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. That's
Oh,
so
wow.
cool.
So,
But I
Oh
still
yeah,
love
sorry.
music.
Yeah.
No, I still love music. In the Cuban, we work with Grammy-nominated pianist Hilario Duran, and music was such a big part of that movie as well. So, I mean, it's always there. It's just I'm not on stage anymore. You
Right.
yeah.
Do you
I'm
find
so
yourself like, oh, sorry, Justine.
Oh, that's okay. I'm curious just in my own inspiration in film. Like, you talk about music and film. Do you do you have a sense of the tone of music that you want? Is the music in your head? Do you work with someone or the same person that kind of you're on the same page? Do you have like what how does that process work? How does the music inform the film and vice versa for you?
Well, I do think about it a lot. when I'm when I'm brought on to direct a movie, it's harder to kind of get in the head of the writer and the creators and then adopt that. But generally, when we're working on our own stuff, I'm thinking about music super early on, even when I'm reading the script, because it helps me evoke images. And that's why I love driving so much. I play music and I think and you know what I mean? And so images naturally pop up. So yes. I also use music on set, which is uncommon and drives sound people crazy, but um, sometimes I think it's necessary because it gets everybody in the same vibe, like super
Mm-hmm.
quick. And it's just such a subliminal tool to get everybody in a good mood, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
music therapy. It works.
Oh, yes.
All the therapy. Yeah. That's super cool. I was going to ask basically the same thing, Justine. I love that. Just, I find that with myself that if I hear a certain sound, I'll see the image that I'm creating. Do you don't write, do you, Sergio?
Um, Very little. I mean,
Right.
I write, but not as a profession or yeah.
Oh, okay. But I
I
guess
write
so
I
when
write
you're
just to help me kind of figure things out. But I'm not a writer now.
right, yeah. So as a director, I guess if you're reading a script and you're trying to map out like, okay, what are my steps here? You'll probably go to sound to help you figure
Oh yeah.
out. Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's
then
awesome.
and then my process is that then the scribbles start on the script about
Yeah.
what the character backstory or what the I guess the main theme of the scene is or what I want to accomplish in a scene. And music is just one of the tools in the toolbox to help. Like if it's I don't know melodramatic scene, then music certainly helps push those elements and then you have to interpret that for all the different departments. Like how does this melodramatic scene affect the production designer in how they how they decide colors, for example, or how does the actor approach this scene? What is their sort of backstory or trigger that helps get them there, and how can I support that journey? Um, yeah, so I always I think it starts with the blueprint, with the script, and then all those
Mhm.
other elements tie in. But yeah, music is definitely a big part of that.
I love.
It's cool.
And I'm so curious too. This is something I love that you brought up, like just director notes on the script, all the scribbles. I would love to see a series of published scripts, like after films have come out, just seeing what the directors wrote, like what the heck is in their head, where were they going? I would love to see that because I know some of mine are messier than others. Some of them make sense and some of them don't. Some of them are very blanket, just circling things, and some of them it's like very, very, very intense. And I know everybody's different, so I love that you. I would love to see what that looks like for you.
Well, I shared it. I shared it in a workshop recently. I was mortified because it's sort of like it's like a magician revealing their bag of tricks or like behind the curtain of how they do things, right? So there's
Oh
like
yeah,
um it's it's like burying your soul in a
it's
way.
intimate. Oh yeah.
But if you look at like The Godfather, Francis Ford Coppola has his notes like in one of the making of. It's very
Mm.
cool because it's layers and layers and layers. And now I'm starting to utilize technology to help organize those thoughts and those notes so that all the departments can have that information versus me trying to read it later on when I'm freaking out and stressed and whatever. It's yeah,
In the throes of it, yeah.
yeah, exactly.
That's super cool. I love that we have tools that help us with that too, because it's Justine and I have spoke about this where sometimes the chain of communication can break down. So if there's, it's great to take advantage of, like, okay, this is what happened in my brain, and now you all get to be aware of it thanks to new technology.
Yeah. And sometimes the scribbles don't matter. Sometimes it's just a means to an end. Like
Mm.
it's like, it just led you to where you are. And sometimes I don't even refer back to them because when you really think about it, by the time you get to set, the important stuff is on your heart and on your mind. You're going to know what to do. Like it's all there. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. You brought up a film, and I want you to talk about it. And I know this is one of the questions that I believe Sarah you wrote, and I'm very interested in hearing more. So, what drew you to wanting to make The Cuban?
Um, I think it was after working on a long animation movie called Arctic Dogs. The process of that was traumatic in some ways, and it just took me a little bit away from directing and the core of the creative drive. And then I had personal things like my dad had passed away at that time, and um, so it was all timing, right? I met a youngish actress named Anna Golia from Degrassi at a party, and I said, why don't we just do something for the sake of doing something? It always starts like that. It's like, let's just do a short film. It'll be super easy. A bunch of friends. We'll just get together. We don't have to stress. And then that ballooned into, working Oscar winner, Lou Gossett Jr., locations, big cast, the whole thing. So yeah, where it started and where it ended up was pretty wild. It ended up doing an Oscar nomination race and ending up in Time Magazine and
Oh wow.
top 50 according to Variety. Like it was, yeah, that wasn't why we did it. The impetus for it was really to tell that story, that sort of father grandfather figure with a younger character and how and really telling the story of how a man with dementia reconnects to his memories through his passion for music and through his interactions with this young nurse. So yeah, so that's why we did it. And then it took us on this journey. It was pretty wild.
That's so wild. I feel like I mean, I don't know you very well, but I feel like in our few interactions, that's been a theme is you're always leading with your heart. And I feel like it always gets you into these incredible stories that are so like captivating to hear. So I love that you said, hey, let's do this thing for fun. And it was all heart based. And then all of a sudden you've got this, very, very beautiful journey of going into, the Oscar world and the bids for
It
that.
has to start there. I think it has to start there. And all the conversations I'm having now on a daily are all like very trite surface. Like the industry's gotten to a place where people aren't even reading scripts. It's like, who's in it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who's in it? What genre is it? How can we sell it? It's like if it starts there, it's when you remember the films of the '70s, there was more, I think, an openness to allow the artist to lead because they're
Mhm.
accessing information and channeling. I don't know where creativity comes from, but I'm assuming it comes from a non-worldly place. And if you allow the artist to lead, they may take you
Mhm.
somewhere where you're gonna have a Star Wars or a Godfather or Chinatown, But
Mm-hmm.
that's not happening anymore. Now it's all like reverse engineering. It's like that worked last week. Let's just do more of that, and it
Oh,
creates
it's
a
so
Oh
lot.
yeah.
painful. Just take all the art
Yeah,
away from the creation process. Yeah. Like when you've got
Yeah.
an idea and then all of a sudden you've got this producer says, okay, I'll read it, but I'm not going to move forward with you unless we have so and so or so and so. And you're like, immediately,
Yeah.
now I've got like, part of the creation process or the magic is gone because it has to be what you're
Yeah.
thinking and not. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
it's so commodified, but I'm
It's
curious
changing
too.
though. I think it's changing.
Oh, I hope
Yeah,
so.
Good. Yay.
But I'm curious myself, with your commercial film work experience, your feature film experience, the fact you've done animations, if you've worked in television, what brought you back to a short film? Like what keeps bringing you back to short films?
well, you don't have to rely on millions of dollars and hundreds of people. It's like, you know what I mean? And besides short films, it's really like, technology, AI, where that's going. It's the fact that we can do this with an iPhone now. We can make movies. Like it's really putting the art back in the hands of the artists. And now, what's the excuse? It's not like, oh, you don't have Tom Cruise starring in your movie
Mhm.
or, millions of dollars, but you do have all these tools. So are you going to create? And
Yeah.
those are the questions that we're faced with every day. It's like, why aren't you creating? So I think a short film
Yeah.
allows us to kind of explore that without the pressures of like the market. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
It's just
And
pure
I
art form. It's like, yeah,
Yeah. Well, I know that Wes Anderson came out with a short on Netflix, and that was controversial. And I know Sarah and I were chatting about this too, where it's like, good for you for like going back to art and doing something that's,
yeah,
there's not as much. His was still affiliated with Netflix, and there were all these things. But and I know a lot of people were like, oh, he's back in shorts. No, he's trying to take over, but
oh God,
sometimes.
yeah,
But
I
how
think he
did
just
you
wanted
feel
to
when
go
you
back
saw
to his
that?
roots. Yeah.
totally. And I was inspired by people like Ed Burns that when he made Newlyweds, that blew me away. It's like he made that with, five of his friends. And oh, I know a guy who owns a cafe. I know a gal who owns a restaurant. We're just going to piece it together. And they made a movie and it was watchable and it was great. And so I reached out to his producer who's from Toronto and we've talked through like what that looks like and how. So, yeah, so that inspired us to make the colossal failure of the modern relationship, which was literally like, how do we make this on a credit card? And you start
Ooh.
piecing it
That's
together. It's
awesome.
like, oh, that winery will give us their restaurant for free as long as we show their logo, and like it starts all like coming together, and
Yeah.
and then we're going to partner with Niagara College, and we're going to train their film students in exchange. And by the way, they're
Oh,
going to have their
gee.
culinary department feed us the whole time. They're going to practice their gourmet skills on us, and so it starts coming together, and then suddenly like you're making a movie. So
Yeah.
I love the spirit of that because then no one can stop us. We can just make stuff.
Yeah, I feel like that's often what people get blocked by is, oh, I can't have that location because it costs X amount of dollars. Well, what if you negotiate? What if you say, hey, I have this skill to offer? Or, I mean, like, I think not everyone could jump in on their first film and say, hey, we're going to teach you how to make a movie. But there's always something that, like, there's always some kind of conversation that can be had where you go, hey, I'd love to do this. How can we make this work that works out for both of us? That's super
Yeah,
cool.
and I mean, and nobody. I mean, it's sort of a taboo topic, but like there's indigenous film groups up north that are like, they're looking to collaborate and do stuff, and there's
Yeah.
film schools all over the place with film students and acting schools, and so the talent is there. It's just somebody has to
Mhm.
say go, and that's what I realized over the years is like until I say go, nothing happens. Like somebody has to wake up and go, okay, we're doing this. This is the date. I don't
Yeah.
know how we're gonna do it, but like we're just going to figure it out. Someone has to jump out
Yeah.
of the airplane
Gotta
and
take the
hope the parachute
lead.
opens.
Absolute. And I love that you, so I wonder, do you do this everywhere you go? Like you really jumped in, you got the community involved. You went through their education, their local businesses,
Yes.
and you kind of tapped in. How do you find navigating that, and what would you recommend for other people who are curious how to even approach that? Because that's fabulous, and that's such a great way of getting people involved and making them feel like they're a part of it.
I think if you approach anything in life as a win-win, like if you're going to shoot a movie in, I don't know, Timmins, Ontario, you should meet the mayor, you should meet the council, find out what their needs are, find out, do they have a college? Do they have film students? Is there an interest? I love stepping into new communities where films have never been made because there's still like kind of like an
Mhm.
excitement around it. And you're always going to get
Yeah.
somebody to be like, wow, I've never seen a movie happen. I just want to be a part of it. And with the Cuban, we had a crowdfunding element to it, which was really small but important because we engaged community super early, and a lot of those people ended up showing up on set. So you have to be open to like, there was a guy who showed up in a trench coat and a fedora, and I clocked him because I'm highly visual and you're on a set and I'm going to notice things like that. I'm like, who's that dude? And he's like, oh, he's a crowdfunding guy who's like your producer. You know what I mean? And all he wanted to do was just be on set. And I said, come sit next to me and let's, watch this. As long as people aren't like getting in my way and preventing me
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
doing my job, then it's like I'm all for it. And I think
Yeah.
it's just being open to the idea that we're not curing cancer. It's like it should be a fun, open process, and we should be inclusive in our approach to that as well.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask, okay, so this is one of the main reasons that I was like, I knew you were on our list as someone to talk with when we were building this podcast, but one of the main reasons I was like, oh my gosh, I want to talk to Sergio is that post you made about the Lamborghini movie and getting the rights to that, because that story, speaking of like just your open-hearted ability to collaborate and to include people and to have those beautiful relationship building conversations, I want to hear the full breakdown of how that happened.
Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes to a fault because our industry's full of sharks, so you have to be super careful.
Yeah.
But it's like you also have to live in the world, like so you have to take chances
Mhm.
and you have to kind of put things out there. So I think it was like circa 2012, somewhere in there. I can't remember the exact date, but I was invited to Italy to receive an award, and one of the presenters was Tonino Lamborghini. And after the show, he came up to me and he's like, "I really want to talk to you about a story that's near and dear to my heart." And he had written a book about his dad, and he presented me the book, and he said, "I want to give you this gift, and also I want you to make the movie about my father." And I was like, "Wow, I'm honored." And so I take the book and I go back to LA and I, do my rounds, and everybody was like, car movie, who cares about a car guy? Like I was getting that reaction, like kind of like, who cares? So I was a bit disheartened and we sort of put it on the back burner. And then it's all about timing too, right? So, um, there was a sort of a production finance group out of Europe, and one day we're just sitting there and I said, look at this book. What do you think of this story? And they loved it. They're like, wow, this is amazing. And, then it just sort of took on a life of its own as films do. Um, it went in a different direction, different director, different sort of
Mhm.
casting ideas. But in the end, I'm really proud of the fact that it got made, and it took more than 10 years to do that. So it's like, you
Wow.
just don't know. Like sometimes you'll have a slate and you think, this is the film that's going to happen next. And it's just like, whatever, God, the universe decides for you. It's like you think you have a plan, and then it's just like suddenly this other thing gets dropped in your lap. So that's the other thing. It's just like have plans, but then also throw them in the garbage because you have to be super flexible
Yeah.
so it did manifest, just not in the way that I had imagined.
Yeah.
But it happened and it took that long.
Oh my god. See, it's funny, like most people don't realize, or they're very hard on themselves when something takes a little bit long to get off the ground. We have this
Mm.
expedited idea of how fast, like just because of the world we live in with like the way social media is and the way content is put out and films are put
Right.
out on Netflix, we have streaming services, everything's so expedited, so fast. And so when you hear stories like this where it's like it took 10 years from beginning to the like final stage, like completion of this, some people would get so disheartened. And I know a lot of people who are like, oh, I've been trying to get this feature off the ground and I can't get it. I had this idea, 6 years ago, and I just finished writing it and I don't know if it's ever going to happen. And this is kind of one of those stories where, yeah, it was always there and you wanted to do it. Yeah. Takes forever. Sometimes, I know
I
I've been
would
writing
love, I
something
would,
for 10 years.
yeah, I mean, there's nothing more that I would love than to have things happen quick. But I'm relying on so many people before I can get in the chair and do stuff, right? So patience is definitely a part of it, but also um, letting go of this idea that life in your art has to be a certain way. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
when I made my first movie over a small cup of coffee, I had an image in my mind, and then I mapped it out on a piece of paper. But then I got to set, and it doesn't look exactly the way I had envisioned, and that freaked me out. And then it's like, then you shoot it, and it's like, but then it morphs into something else, and then you have to
Uh-huh.
be able to accept that. And then the editor messes with it, and like,
Yeah.
and collaborates, and is like, why do you need this? It's like, well, because I spent 2 days shooting it. Yeah, but it doesn't make sense, or it's crap, or it doesn't serve the story, and then they pluck that
Mm.
out. So then, and then you watch it with an audience, and you're like, oh, I really thought that was funny, but the audience is laughing at this. So it's like, it keeps morphing into something else. So it's like,
Yeah.
I think the creative process is also getting out of your own way and being like, it's not about you, really.
Yeah, trust. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the award in Italy that you were there in 2012 for?
It was called Italian Women in the World. Strangely, I'm not a woman.
Fitting. We've
Yeah,
got Elvis in the
seriously.
building.
Yeah, exactly. But the story was looking for Angelina. It was a really empowering story about a woman, an immigrant woman who murdered her abusive husband with an axe on Easter Sunday in 1911. So I mean, that set a precedent for Canadian law, and it also set a precedent internationally, around
Wow.
issues of family abuse, domestic violence. So I was awarded for that.
Wow.
It's incredible.
Oh, that must have been
Yeah, it
an
was a
interesting
powerful
story.
story. Yeah.
Yeah, just like dealing with subject matter like that. You've got this crime that happened, but then this series of horrific
Right.
events. That must have been an interesting thing to kind of navigate for as far as the
Well,
storytelling.
yeah, I wasn't drawn. A lot of people would have been drawn to the crime, like how did the murder happen? We got to show the blood, the things, and all that.
Yeah.
For me, it was more about how was this immigrant community treated? What did they go through, including like having to form their own Medicare system or way of
Mm.
getting educated and getting healthcare and running water. How did this Italian community overcome that? How did the justice system treat her as a woman and as an immigrant? And then I mean, beyond that, we learned a ton around family dynamics and what domestic violence looks like and
Mhm.
how it affects all aspects and sectors of our society. And yeah, so we learned so much. And I think that's where we really started to believe that we can make a difference making film. And the social impact part of it was as fascinating to us as actually making the movie itself. Because it's
Mm-hmm.
not just, how do we come in a room and sell overpriced popcorn? It's like, how do we make art that's actually going to make a difference? And I think that's more fulfilling than just, hey, let's just make a movie.
Yeah. I really admire how much you pour yourself into the work. Like just to, like you said, it would be very easy to just look at facts, but instead you're going, oh no, I want to really go through this learning curve and I want to look at the heart, or like the feeling side of it, and what would it feel like to be in these people's shoes, and what are they affected by?
Well, I mean, that's the tricky part about the whole argument around cultural appropriation. It's like, if we're only doing things that we know something about, or we're sort of like staying in our lane, we're not expanding as artists. Like, I'm not learning anything about other cultures, about other people, about the human condition. You know what I mean? So that's sort of, that's the danger in that. Um, but I mean, that's one of the most gratifying things is like wherever in the world I've been, you meet other filmmakers and we're speaking the same language. Like you know what I mean? Like we're all the kind of quirky and the outliers. Like we're all sort
It's
of
true.
like
It
looking
is.
at
It's like,
life through a micro, you know? Yeah.
yeah, there's a universal thread there. It's honestly, it
Yeah,
is so
for
true.
sure.
Wherever you go and you find the artists, you find the filmmakers, there's some weird connection that we have, and I that's why I love going to film centers. And I know a lot of places that have residencies, and I've heard the story from so many artists and filmmakers where it's like, oh, I went to Spain or
Yeah.
Denmark or like anywhere around the world, and just automatically you feel like you just like you find your people, when you do these residencies, and everything kind of clicks. And that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a window into the world and we get to connect through this medium. And when we did the Cuban, I learned so much about Afghan culture because like most North Americans, I only saw it through the lens of the media, which is, it's like a war torn, country. And what I learned, and I've asked them multiple, I called them my Afghan family who was always on set, and they, were like, what's important to you? And they wanted to show how rich the culture was, how much history, the food, the culture, the traditions. So anyway, yeah, we sort of went the extra mile to make sure that that was all true and authentic, and real as it could be in this kind of
Yeah.
pretend land.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So I'm curious that just hearing your narrative on filmmaking and just how you've kept pushing. Some things have taken longer. Do you like what do you have to say about perseverance in film? Because I know that's a huge aspect as an artist, as a filmmaker. You kind of have to really believe in yourself, and you have to keep pushing. And it's like, what is your view on perseverance, and how would you talk about that in yourself, and how would you say that to others? And I know you mentioned something about education or a workshop, so I would love for you to talk about the workshop a little bit more, and like your ideas on education and mentorship. But anyway, that's a lot of stuff wrapped up, but pick what you will from that.
Mm, right. Um, yeah, I think I mean, the mentorship, apprenticeship part of it, like I've had many mentors throughout my life and career. I've met a lot of my heroes and I give so much credit to them because they may have said something in passing, like whether it's like James Cameron, who said, just pick up the camera and shoot something, to Alexander Payne, who said, like, whether you're doing $100 million movie or a $10 movie. It's like really about the actors, the script, the important stuff, not the guy in the khakis that says you don't know what you're doing or whatever, all the other sort of peripheral stuff. It's really focusing on what's important. So I think mentorship and apprenticeship is super important. And I like to give back where I can, also selfishly because I'm always learning. As like if there's a young filmmaker, every week I have somebody reach out and be like, I have a question, because it helps me kind of reconnect to why I'm doing this in the first place. Because it's easy to forget, and there's a lot of really like not fun things about the business. So I think
Yeah.
perseverance, mindset, working on yourself is everything, because the business, whether deliberate or not, I don't know, but it has a way of stripping you down and kind of, it's soul crushing stuff. The rejection, the you're not good enough, there's sort of a culture around it. It's like, well, you're not an A-list star, so you're not worth anything. It's like now we're being traded like commodities. You know what I mean? Or well, you're the drama guy, you can't do sci-fi or thriller. Or you're a girl, you can't hold a camera. I've heard that.
Oh,
We love hearing that.
I had a
I
prof
wish
say that to me. I literally
it's
had someone in
idiotic.
film
So,
school say that to me.
right. So there's that. And yeah, on the Cuban, my DP, Ciliana, who's petite, but like mighty and incredible and just like a really talented artist. Yeah, somebody asked her like, could you hold the camera and how are you going to manage a bunch of like burly men on set? It's like, so it's that kind of stuff that um,
Mm-hmm.
is traumatic, but also could you turn that into inspiration? And so a lot of that's going away, but I think ultimately you still have to get out of bed and show up and value yourself and
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge your gifts and be in a position to share them because unlike sports, and I say this often, we don't have a coach, we don't have physical trainers, we don't have like you're basically sent out to the wolves and be like, you're sent out there, and I feel bad for young actors who like, shipped off to Hollywood with no clue and with
Right.
no like mindset preparation for what they're
Yeah.
about to endure, you know.
I feel like that's a big theme with a lot of the folks that we have lined up to be on our show, because you're one of our first guests. You're among the pile of the early guests of this. Yeah, woo woo. But I feel like that theme has already become pretty dominant and will continue to be with the people we have lined up is mindset, mindset, mindset. Like believe in yourself, believe in your art, show up for yourself, trust that all is going to work out.
And you don't have to
Yeah.
suffer for your art. That's another thing that,
Yeah.
well, a few things. Canadian culture it's the poppy syndrome, it's like it's this idea that it's sort of a socialist mentality. It's like you have to be
Mm.
poor and struggle for your art and suffer. And that's not necessarily true. You have to be perseverant.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think it's almost sinful to not be successful and not share your gifts,
Mm-hmm.
I think you've been
Yeah.
given these gifts. It's your obligation to get up in the morning, even if you don't feel like it, and show up and make stuff. And there's always somebody counting on you, even if it's like one person. There's always somebody outside of yourself that you can show up for.
Well, and you never know if you decide to go fly to another country to receive an award when you'll be handed what I think is a very big project, like that's, which I'm also, to circle back to the Lamborghini project, I can't believe that that anyone would have turned that down. So it's not just any car company. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
but you
Right.
just never know.
Yeah, and I'm confidentially in talks now about another car movie that where the person is not as
Oh.
famous, but it's still that underdog story, and it's like, yeah, the I think the blessing and gift that Lamborghini had was just like everyone at any corner of the globe knows that brand, so it's like a
Yeah.
recognizable brand, and it was just some dude who had ambition and perseverance, and he was told by Ferrari that you're just basically a dumb farmer and stay in your lane, and
Wow.
look at what he's been able to build. So yeah, you need tenacity for sure, and you have to be headstrong.
Ooh. So I guess this is kind of leading to uh I mean, we have a lot of questions, but I'm very curious just hearing your background and hearing your interests. And this is kind of maybe a little bit of a nerdy question, but as a filmmaker who's like also very inspired by Italian cinema, like both neorealism, like Vittorio De Sica, Visconti, Rossellini, and then you have contemporary Italian filmmakers like Sorrentino. Like, what do you
Yeah.
find most inspiring about Italian cinema? What are some films that drove you to filmmaking like that it like created that passion? I'm just so curious. I saw you write that in your bio, and I was like, oh, I need to talk about
Justine's
this.
Italian. They've got to talk. They've got to talk.
I'm just a film nerd. I love film. I love cinema.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, they don't give themselves enough credit for it, the Italians. But I mean, they were there since the beginning of cinema,
Mm.
since the advent of the art form. So I think it's in the DNA. I think that when you go to Italy, you see how the ordinary is not acceptable. Like everything is like has to be extraordinary and
Yeah.
artistic, and like there's a striving for excellence. And I think that ironically, the interesting thing I find about neorealism is the simplicity of it. Like it just cuts
Mm.
right to the core of like a father and a son story, or like you know what I mean? Like it's super
Yeah.
simple narrative storytelling, and it just like touches you so deeply. So I think, and then people like Fellini like totally turned the art form upside down. They were just like, I'm just gonna create whatever I have in my head, even if you don't
Yeah.
understand it, kind of art. He just created his own world, his own lane. So, but yeah, I find the storytelling, like if you look at 8.5, it's just so simply, beautifully executed. It's like
Mm.
everything is like every frame is like a painting. Um, so I think it's that,
Wow.
and not so obsessed with like the Hollywood star thing. It's more about, you know what I mean? I think it's like taking
Absolutely.
incredible faces off the street or somebody you meet in a cafe, and that's your person,
Mm-hmm.
and you make
Mm-hmm.
that work. So it's that.
Yeah, the characters, you see that a lot in Fellini. There are so many characters, there's so many unique personalities. But even in Sorrentino's films, what was that one?
Hmm.
The Great Beauty? Was that what was? I can't remember what it's called. And
La
you,
Grande Bellezza.
yeah,
The
and
yeah,
whoo, and the characters, the personalities, it's just this vast. It just seems like people that you would see in the street and you meet every day, and there's a natural, even though there's this magical element to his films in particular, there's this very natural, like realistic view of humanity around him, and you see that in Neoreal, like the Bicycle Thieves. That's something that I know that's one
hmm
of the more uh, common ones that people are aware of when you think of neorealism, but it is this truth and this simplicity and this realism that makes it feel grounded in reality, and make that's what makes it so effective. That's what makes you so emotionally drawn to these stories. This is what makes me cry every time it comes on,
yeah.
you know.
It's fresh and it feels real.
Yeah.
Um, that's yeah. I mean, when you see Tom Cruise in a movie, you're seeing Tom Cruise playing a character. Whereas the Bicycle Thief, you just see that guy and you think that's him. Like it's he's not playing a character. That's the person. So it's
Mm.
yeah. I think there's something interesting about that. Alexander Payne, just he's another huge neorealism fan, and I'll call him a mentor as well. He did the Holdovers, and the lead character in that has never acted before. He just like auditioned him at a high school and found him and looked. I mean, watch the film; it holds up, and it's like that. Like, how do you explain that to a Hollywood executive? It breaks all the
Yeah,
rules, but it works. Somebody had to take a risk on that,
totally.
I
and
love
allow
that.
him to do that. So yeah.
What would you say? I guess this will be a two-parter. What would you say is a risk you took that you were like, oh, okay, this paid off? And then I'm also curious, if you have a distinct recollection of the first moment that you were like, oh, okay, I got to be in film. Like, this is my world. This is where I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, so I'll start with the first part of the question. A risk that I took was my first feature, Looking for Angelina. That was funded as a documentary, and we took the money and ran off and made a movie. I think that was a
That's
huge,
awesome.
huge risk, and it could have gone terribly wrong, but it worked out in my favor, and it launched my career, and it in some ways, launched our company at Snap Films, and
Wow.
so I think that was, but like, yeah, when you don't know, you just do it. You don't know the risks. There's
Yeah,
an innocence to that, just jumping out of the airplane and not knowing, how you're going to land. Um, yeah, I've become way more pragmatic and cynical since then. But in those days, it was like, hey, we got money, man. We'd never seen money. It's like, what do we do? How do we turn this into a movie? And
yeah.
thankfully, you know what I mean? And thankfully, the
What
funder
do
was
you
just
do
like,
with this?
we don't know what to do. Like, how do we don't do movies. It's like, but trust me, you're going to love it. And they
That's
did
funny.
extremely well. They did extremely well. They've aired it like 1,000 times. everyone was
Oh, that's
happy. But
awesome.
that was a huge risk because that kind of money I'd never seen before. It's like,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. It can be a big, Justine and I have spoken about that, where when you get that first paycheck that you've never seen that number and you're like, okay, so now I'm responsible for all of this and I've got to make product.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then the moment, well, there were several moments, but like, yeah, where it really started is I was trying to figure out how to survive and hustling. And so I had a vintage clothing shop and I was selling Canadian designer
Cool.
stuff and sitting there trying to figure out how to make art and how to make films. And then one day this director walked in. Well, this director, I mean, this the guy who had like a sprinkler company and had made a movie and he had a VHS tape. And I'm like,
So
I thought
random.
it's so random. And I thought like only people in Hollywood make movies, right? Like how does a guy who lives in a suburb in Canada make a movie? So I was fascinated. So I was seduced and went into his world for a while and apprenticed and learned all that I could. And I was just fascinated that some dude raised money and got a bunch of actors and shot something. So for me, that's where it started. And
Right.
from that moment on, I was like, well, I can do this, you know?
Oh
Yeah.
man.
You drank the Kool-Aid.
You drank.
Yeah. And there's no rehab. There's no rehab. No way to get out. Once you get in, you can't get out.
No,
Yeah.
I know. You're constantly, yeah, it's true. It's like it's like you're, I don't know if this visual rings true, but you're like in the Sims game, you're in the pool without the the ladder and you're just like, we're just in there forever, man. We're treading water forever.
That's what it is. It's like an addiction. Even when the whole world's telling you, like, 15-year-olds don't watch movies, movie theaters are empty. Why are you still making movies? So it's almost like, yeah, it's forcing us to maybe have to look at TikTok, and maybe that's what we have to do is like start a YouTube channel and start making content in it, or start a
Yeah.
podcast, or like, it doesn't really matter. I think for a long time I was like, no, I'm a filmmaker and I'm like diehard on that, but like,
Yeah.
I can do like lifestyle cooking stuff in Italy. I don't care. I
Yeah.
spent 6 months
Yeah.
in the
You're a
south of France, and
storyteller.
why not?
You're gonna
I'll tell stories
Exactly.
about
You're a
that
storyteller. You're going to find a way to do it, whether it's like a
for
certain
sure.
format or another format. We
Yeah.
have a question, an audience question. Sarah, did you want to take this question?
Oh, sure. Okay. Questions from the curious. What style of direction do you find works best for you? And do you have more of a hands-on approach, or do you let your actors interpret their characters intuitively? And this is
Yeah,
from
those are
Gina.
great. Gina, great question. Thank you. Um, so style has evolved and changed, and it also depends on the movie. So typically, I don't do storyboards. I don't like over plan, and you know what I mean? I'm sort of like spontaneous in the moment, and I've learned to use my gut a lot on things. It's just the way that I came up. Like when I did Looking for Angelina, it was all cut in my head. I shot the movie that I like. There's no extra stuff, which editors hate. Um, but it puts you
No
in a
B-roll?
corner. Like no B-roll, nothing. So it was like, but we didn't have the luxury to do that. But now it depends on the movie. Now it's like I've realized or I've learned in my wisdom that like planning is important and sharing as much as you can with your team is important. On the actor side, because I worked with a lot of inexperienced actors, I studied acting and there was sort of like this supportive teacher kind of vibe like I was there in the trenches with the actor. But then once you work with somebody like Shohreh Agdashlu or Lou Gossett Jr. or Lauren Holly, it's like there's not much to direct. You're literally just the eyes and ears of the audience, and your job is to create the space for them to create and to present options. So my directing style has changed because the actors have changed, and like,
Yeah.
Did you study acting for yourself, like to maybe dabble in acting, or did you study it more to strengthen as a director?
More as a director. Yeah, I studied with Rose Dubin who just passed away, unfortunately. She, I don't know if this is a compliment to her or not, but she trained Keanu Reeves and others, um, and through the Seneca program, which was amazing. But I
Okay.
studied it mostly so I can learn the tools of and I'm still learning. I'm still diving into that, like how to press certain buttons or how to create language or communicate in a way to get the best out of your actors.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, that's an ongoing thing. But it's something that I think all filmmakers should do. Even writers should learn how actors process information, how they
Mhm.
interpret scripts. I think it's super important. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, a lot of directors now are coming from script supervising or DOP or
Yeah.
whatever the case may be, or even actors. Like what actors do and what directors do, they're two different jobs. It's like you
Hmm.
can't be like a heart surgeon and then do brain surgery. Like they're two different things. So I think it's important to kind of learn all aspects of it as you evolve.
Yeah.
Hmm.
This is something that's come up a couple times actually in conversation of it's such a testament to the character of someone in a leadership position, whether it's producing, it's writing, it's or especially directing. You're leading a team to understand what they're going through, to know how they're I love that you the way you phrase that, to learn how they process that information, know what they do with it, how they do it. It just allows for a better set, more compassion, and better planning or understanding, and just better leadership overall. So I think that's really great advice, and it's so cool to hear, like seeing your experience and the things you're interested in, the wonderful things that you've done, that like at your core you're still constantly pushing yourself to learn and pushing yourself to see outside of your own lens. That's wonderful. Wonderful thing to hear.
Thank you. Yeah, the tools are out there. Like
Yeah.
Masterclass is
Hmm.
inexpensive and accessible to everyone, and you can learn from like Ron Howard or Scorsese. The great master. It's like, yeah, when I started, we had to fast forward VHS tapes to the end, and sometimes
Mhm.
you would have like a behind the scene thing because I had never been on set. Like, how do I figure out who does what?
Right.
You know what I mean? So now it's like everything's out there on YouTube.
I
Yeah.
miss the there used to be commentary on DVDs, and I
Oh,
miss that you like I want Netflix bring out commentary. We need commentary for I want to hear the behind the scenes
oh
facts from these
God.
sets.
The extended
True.
editions.
I used to love that also because it forces you to watch it several times.
Yeah.
Right? So it had a lot of value. You have a DVD and it had all these extra features. I thought that was amazing. Yeah, you're
Totally.
Yeah.
right. We need to bring that back.
I
Wait,
love it. Oh
Netflix, don't take
man.
my idea. This is
It's
I'm patenting it.
yeah, that just I
um.
remember.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Justin.
No, I was just gonna
I
go on
think I have
another
a
Lord of
delay.
the Rings tangent.
Oh, we love a Lord of the Rings tangent.
Oh man, I just remember on the extended edition of one of them, they were talking about making the mail and how they lost their the people who were making them lost their fingerprints because of doing everything by hand, and that always stuck with me. So yeah, that like when you mentioned just the things that you
Wow.
learn, the things that you see. I know, I thought it was so cool. This little like, when did that come out? 2001. I was 10 years old. It's like, oh, mail,
Oh
so
yeah.
cool. Let's bring it back.
um,
Let's do it.
yeah. Well, we our next two segments. So we have what we call hot lunch horror stories, which is basically like an on-set horror story. But we can also teeter that into the opposite, where it's just like a magic moment. So we do have one that was shared with us, but I'm curious, do you have any, being as anonymous as you can be, redact whatever info to keep it anonymous, but do you have a bad setting experience that can help someone learn?
Um, I mean, there's many. So every time, yeah, every film has train wrecks and disasters and things that happen.
Mm.
Um, I think, yeah, the one that comes to mind is really going to Cuba and shooting in Havana and with best intentions and like having all these grand plans about what we're gonna do. And my first AD, who was like, a top tier A, DGC, like very experienced guy, wanted everything like organized. And
Mhm.
we had this big shot on the Malecon, which is like the main street by the seaside in Havana. And it's like we had no way to lock that down. We were told we were going to have police and all these things, and then we show up there, and like, first of all, we show up on time because crew time, there's certain call time, and we show up, and it was just the two of us. No one was there. I'm like, where the heck is everyone?
Oh
And then
no.
he's like,
Wow.
where are all the period cars? Like, we needed all these period cars, and none of it. So anyway, eventually they all show up, but the street still was not locked down. And the producer was like, "We'll
Yeah.
do it. Don't worry, don't worry." But then it's like, "Yeah, we're gonna worry because it's not gonna happen." And then all of a sudden, miraculously, as soon as like it was magic hour, the sun was setting, we had this gorgeous sunset, and all of a sudden, all the traffic just stopped, and like it was like the
Oh,
sea had parted, and we just didn't understand why. But we're like, we need to go, 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 and it's like
Shoot.
go for it,
yeah.
just shoot, right? And we discovered later that there was some diplomatic event happening where they had to reroute traffic, and it just
Oh
created
my
that magic
gosh.
moment, that window for us that was started as a disaster but ended up being an incredible gift.
Perfect.
Because when you see
Wow.
that shot in the film, it's like, wow, how did they get that? You know what I mean? It's like,
The
That's
stars
wild.
aligned.
Yeah.
and yeah, there's been other disasters, but we survived. We survived
Yeah.
Mhm.
somehow. You end up getting to the end, and it all works out somehow. It's weird.
Yeah. Justine, do you want to read the one from our listener?
Sure. Yeah, this one's, I mean, I've definitely seen or heard about situations like this happening before, and especially when you're early in film and you're still figuring out what the rules are, like laws,
Yeah.
especially. But so here we go. This is, I'm quoting directly. I was in a second unit taking some wide shots of an elementary school from behind a fence in a parking lot while driving a white U-Haul van. You can imagine how sketchy we looked. I was just a grip. I assumed they had gotten permits, especially to film minors. So inevitably, a teacher approached us and said, "What are you doing here?" The AD froze up, and I had to negotiate our way, again, as a grip, out of the situation. So I'm seeing the word second unit, which means this isn't just like a bunch of kids who are shooting something on a mini DV camera. Like,
Right.
This sounds like a bigger production for sure.
Yeah.
oh,
Well, we had
that's
we had we had Enrico Colantoni. We were shooting in Niagara, and there was no way they would give us permission to shoot on Clifton Hill. So finally, we're just like, screw it. We're just gonna grab the minivan. My DP was like all super seasoned guy who's been around forever and ever, and he's like, "Hey, if you're up for it, I'm down to do it." So he sets up the camera in the minivan, opens the sliding door, and I said to Enrico, "Are you cool with doing it?" He's like, "Yeah, totally. Let's do it." Um, it all sounds great until you get there, and people are like, "Hey, person of interest, flashpoint guy," and like like
Oh yeah.
shouting things out and staring at him, and then
oh
they spot the
no.
camera and they're like, "What's going?" So anyway, we cut around it and it all worked out, but it could have ended badly if we got pulled over or police could have shut it down or whatever. But sometimes you just got to get the shot. If it's safe
Yeah.
and you know,
Yeah.
run it.
Maybe not where there's minors involved. Maybe get permits for that and
No,
talk to the school. But yeah.
I would not recommend that at all.
Oh, oh gosh, I would have been, the guilt would have been so much over my face. I don't even know if I would have been able, they would have probably asked me to leave from set. Like the people shooting have been like, "Justine, please leave." I would have just, me an authority or anything. My face says too much. So the fact that this person had to, had to negotiate out.
Well,
Whew,
ultimately, I mean, the Clifton Hill situation, nobody was being hurt, or like obviously it was
no.
safe and it was fine.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, we exported that image to the world, like bringing it to film
Yeah.
Yeah.
festivals. So we ended up promoting them, and they loved that, and they didn't have to pay
Oh,
anything for
cool.
that. So I
That's
see it
kind
as
of
a
like,
win-win.
well, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
like, that's the guerrilla filmmaking that you hear that's actually you got to run and gun sometimes because you have no choice and you got to be scrappy and stuff. So there's a line. You were on the right. Like, I would say that was a good thing. You guys managed to get everything and everyone was happy and
In
no
Cuba,
one was harmed in the making.
yeah, in Cuba, there's no running and gunning. You'll end up in a jail somewhere. So we have to be super careful. And if you're going to run and gun, we had somebody like a local fixer who, obviously worked for the government and had a relationship. So, I mean, do we have permits for every single thing? No, definitely not. But we made it work.
Yeah. I was going to ask I would assume yes, that you were working with a fixer, but I feel like sometimes people take that risk and go shoot in a foreign country without someone. So,
Not a good idea.
Yeah.
Not a good idea.
We kind of covered our other segment, which is we have an SOS for advice. And so we had asked you if you have any advice for folks who are just starting out. But is there anything else you'd want to expand on as far as like how to face rejection and some of those just starting out mentality?
You need to build a foundation for yourself and have daily routines that help, whether it's meditation, prayer, workout, journaling is a very good one. Just to build yourself up, because it may not come from a parent or parents, it may not come from your friends, even though they mean the best, and often they mean well. I think it's finding those daily routines that build you up and build an armor around you so that no matter what somebody says, you're just like, oh, that's nice. That's an opinion. And the truth is nobody knows anything about what's going to work, what isn't, what's good, what's crap. Like it's so subjective that, I think that would be my advice. And really don't be afraid to ask, like reach out to people and ask for advice and collaborate and make stuff. That's the most important thing. Cause I find that, we all go to these markets, film festivals, events, parties, networking. And if you spend any time in LA at all, you'll see that there's a lot of talk about film, but not a lot of doing. And I think the doing is where the reward is. It's like, if we lose sight of that, then we just become party obsessed, which I've already done and got out of my system. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that part is like easy to do. The harder part is to be disciplined, to actually commit to doing something and seeing it through.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's fabulous. I like the building a sense of security and routine for yourself and making sure that you feel good about who you are, where you are, and what you're doing. It's like putting your oxygen mask on before you put it on, give it to the world. You're making sure that that is really valuable. I know that's something that I've struggled with, is building a routine for myself and giving myself that sense of grace. So I appreciate hearing that personally. So thank you.
It's important. It really is. And that's an inside job. A lot of us are focused on the outside stuff. Me included. I did it for years, going to Cannes, going here, there, networking, running around. I think investing in ourselves is important.
Right.
It's your body, your spirit is your instrument. Like that's, if you're a football player, you're in the gym, you're working out, you're practicing, rehearsing, or a basketball player, and you'll notice that all the sports teams have a mental coach as well. It's not just how many free throws can you throw or execute. It's like, do you have your head screwed on right? Because there's going to be people spitting and shouting and whatever. Right. You still have a job to do, right? So.
Yeah, you got to have a good foundation for yourself.
Yeah. Important. I'm still working on it. Work in progress.
Yeah. I think it is constant, right?
Or just when you think you've gotten there, it comes back at you. More to learn.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I was at this thing and Steve Paikin from The Agenda TVO, he came up to me, he was introduced to me or whatever, and he's like, oh, you're a Canadian filmmaker. Lovely. I've never heard of you. And I said, yeah, how appropriate. I'm a Canadian filmmaker and you've never heard of me. That's awesome. That's when I learned the power of like PR and doubling down on that. You got to think, Americans do some things right. You know,
Yeah.
it's not trite or gauche to talk about yourself or to have
Mm.
help in that social media marketing department. Like it's kind of
Mhm.
like taboo in Canada. We don't want to like brag about ourselves or but we got to sell our art.
Yeah. Yeah.
Make it, we gotta know how to sell it as well.
Right.
100%.
Ooh. We have a
Cool.
final segment called
Okay.
Prompts from a Hat. So this is an interactive one. So we have 4 different prompts: a location, an object, a name, and a genre. We have submissions from our audience members, from our friends and family and
Okay.
colleagues. And so basically, we're going to give you a location, an object, and a character name, and you're going to give us a genre that you think would tie it all together. And that's how we're going to leave everybody off in the audience, and they can maybe start journaling, like you were suggesting, start thinking about just get the creative juices flowing. So, prompts from a hat. We have, Sarah, did you want to read the first one?
Sure. Our location is Istanbul, and that's from Shannon.
Okay.
Cool.
And then we have an object, mortadella sandwich, and that's from Walter.
Character name Oswald. Yeah, that's from Lori. So Istanbul, mortadella sandwich, and Oswald.
What is a genre?
Well, when I heard mortadella sandwich, I thought comedy, but this is sounding more like a thriller to me. It's like, why is he there with a mortadella sandwich? It feels like a spy thriller.
I love it. I love it. That's great. How did he obtain this mortadella?
Right. Why is it there?
Espionage.
Yeah.
I love it.
I love it.
That's
Sergio, oh my gosh. It's such a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you. Really appreciate this. And I appreciate the platform because you don't know. It could be that one person that a light bulb goes off and then suddenly they make the next best thing, So.
Oh yeah.
100%.
Oh yeah. That's the goal. That's what we're hoping. We're hoping that everybody's gonna keep inspiring each other and keep pushing ourselves to create and make and exist and feel happy in the world as a creative spirit that has so much to give. So thank you so much for coming. And again, we have at Snap Films Inc. on Instagram and Twitter, at Sergio Navarretta on Instagram, at Sergio Director on Twitter, and snapfilmsinc.com. If you want to take a look, take a peek, and keep up to date with what Sergio has going on, and keep your eyes open for what we have left, which is going to be taken off in the fall, among other wonderful projects. So please take a look, please take a peek. That's it from and our social, Sarah.
Yeah. You can find us on Instagram at WTAF Pod. We're on YouTube and Facebook at Yas Media Pod, and Yas is spelled JAS as in Justine and Sarah. Our website is yasmedia.ca, so that's jasmedia.ca. And you can also write us in. You can contribute to any of our segments at yasmediapodcast@gmail.com.
Like us, follow us, subscribe. Like Sergio, follow him, subscribe. Listen to his podcast. We're going to start tuning in, and thank you again so much.
Let's make stuff. I'm available. Let's make stuff.
Yes,
do it.
I love that.
Woo! All right. Well, thank you so much. Again, I'm Justine.
I'm Sarah.
Thank you.
And
both.
Thank you. And that's WTAF.
Thanks,
Sergio.
Ciao.
Thank you. Thank you both. I really appreciate this.
Thanks so much for listening to the WTAF We Talk About Film podcast by indie filmmakers for indie filmmakers. If you haven't already, please subscribe to us on Apple or Spotify. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube at Yas Media Pod, and Yas is spelled JAS as in Justine and Sarah. You can also follow us on Instagram at WTAF Pod and on Facebook at Yas Media Pod. We'd love for you to subscribe to our newsletter at yasmedia.ca so you're always in the know.
We'd love to hear from you, so if you feel like submitting to any of our segments, whether it's worst direction I've ever given or gotten, WTAF SOS, What the Fact, Magical Movie Moments, Hot Lunch Horror Stories, or Prompts from a Hat, we would love to hear from you. Send us an email at yasmediapodcast@gmail.com or DM us at WTAF Pod.
Please send us some stuff. We want to hear from you. We love you.
Yes.
JAS Media.